In this food adventure, I'm taking on a food challenge first, a giant bowl of pho, and I'll have to be quick about things because I only have 11 minutes to complete the entire challenge. And let the battle begin, as I'm in the Canley Heights area of Sydney, New South Wales of Australia, at Huong Xua Vietnamese Restaurant. And I'm sure I butchered that enunciation, but at least give me credit for trying before you roast me in the comments. But with this giant bowl of pho comes 500 grams of Vietnamese meats, 500 grams of noodles, and 1.5 liters of broth. And as I mentioned before, you're gonna have to attack this thing with the need for speed, because there's only an 11-minute time limit. And I just want to say that these speedy type of food challenges I've been doing lately, with only having a time limit of like 10 minutes or less, on one hand it is kind of scary because it's not a lot of time, and that usually means just getting straight down to business. But also on the flip side, doing this different style of challenge of sorts, where speed is the focus rather than size, I think it's kind of refreshing. Anyways, getting back to the pho challenge, if you're able to take this thing down within that 11-minute time limit, you get the meal for free, which costs 22 Australian dollars, your picture up on the wall of fame, and check this out, you actually get to keep the bowl the challenge was served in, which, can we just take a moment here to appreciate just how awesome that is? To get a trophy of sorts to commemorate your victory over this pho. But again, with only having 11 minutes to do that, you have to strike this thing down quickly and swiftly. So fun fact, this was my very first pho challenge I've ever attempted. But even so, I'm aware that with pho challenges, or even ramen challenges for that matter, one of the obstacles you're going to be faced with is just how steaming hot the food is. So, one little cheeky tactic you can use before you begin is to add some ice to cool it off. But in this case, that specifically wasn't allowed. So what did I do? Well, I did what I always do. Go to town and send it down. Since this was my first pho challenge, I was just sticking to what I knew was tried and true, which in this case basically meant that I was just gonna try plowing through this thing, full steam ahead. Although, I would be taking a few sips of that ice cold water, which was enough to prevent my mouth from just being totally annihilated. While slurping up this giant bowl of pho in accelerated fashion, the noodles and the broth, fantastic. It had tons of flavor.
King of flavor, MSG.
Okay, so I can't confirm that was the case, but what I can tell you is that the bits of meat were also excellent here. It adds a nice, small change of flavor that really complements the entire dish well. And I also wasn't hating the tiny hints of garnish that would pop up and say hello to my taste buds every once in a while either. Probably makes sense to why this place was just packed full of people during my challenge. Yeah, just packed. And while I would have loved to relish more in these wonderful flavors from this big bowl of pho, I had to keep after it if I was going to take this thing down in time. Now, it was a good time as any to start putting a dent into that broth. Which after a few good swigs, and with things cooled off, it was time to really kick things into high gear.
Yeah!
And the battle is won. My first ever pho challenge win. But hold on, the fun isn't over yet, as it's now time for me to bust out those post-challenge victory push-ups. And while I bust these out, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is I got the win, keeping my winning streak alive. The bad news is, unfortunately, I couldn't take that bowl with me. Not because the restaurant wouldn't let me take it, but I simply had no room to take it with me on this trip, and traveling with it would have been a major pain. Now to watch more from this trip, tap the video on the screen, or click the link in the description down below, and I'll see you there.